welcome back, folks. Thursday, January 11th, 2011. There it is, right there for your own eyes to see. Welcome back, St. Born Live from the Chenigung Studios. All the kings and queens of the Kingdom of God, we welcome you this morning back. It's 7:04 a.m. and we are joined with Libertarian Lou Jasikoff. He is the founder of the Independent Gazette, a very important magazine in this area, and a newspaper, from a libertarian's perspective, one of the only in this whole region, now being distributed across many states now. He is, of course, born and raised in New York City, raised in Long Island. Eventually moved to New Jersey, was in a vehicle transportation business, and of course, served as chair for the Libertarian Party here in Pennsylvania. So you moved around quite a bit in terms of the tri-state area. You know, it was interesting, Lou, just before we get into some of the stuff that we were going to cover, I just popped in my mind. We were just having dinner with Commissioner Matt Osterberg last night with my brother and him. And he was talking about a 5-state commission that can regulate literally every drop of water environmentally that you drop or you hose down out your porch, whatever, because every stream apparently goes into the Delaware Valley. So this is like a 5-state commission, like invented in the 1960s. And you're talking about Delaware, Virginia, you're talking about Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey. So literally you can get some New York and New Jersey politicians regulating every drip of water that comes out of a Pennsylvania resident's home and taxing them for it from this crazy 5-state board. I mean, we're talking about government overreach and the network of deep state bureaucracy. I mean, how do we get untangled from this web?
Pastor, it is really amazing. I mean, our founders warned us about this, about having limited government, and there's a reason for that. And I think, I think we get it, and I'm hoping more people get it, is that you can't always turn to government to regulate not only our lives or to look for it to make it better. I mean, it's, one of the things that we talk about all the time is that, if we maybe return back to what the founders had talked about with a limited government, where we rely on our churches, where we rely on the Polish legions, where we rely on, the Italian clubs for a hand up and to get people moving forward. We're so much better off keeping it local and keeping it amongst ourselves, because we could do a much better job than honestly when we get bureaucrats involved in every fact of our lives. I mean, it's totally amazing about the licensing, everything that we have going on. It's just, it's incredible to me.
I mean, the licensing, and then you got all those regulations, which are basically secret taxes. And we were talking about with Osterberg yesterday. We're saying, hey, every regulation you guys have for business, my brother's like, trying to do something in his warehouse, and he's got like 1 million regulations to build a little pipe stand or something. It's like ridiculous. And it's like, it's not only the taxes, which are pretty high in terms of corporate tax. Now Trump is lowering that down, and he's giving a lot of relief to small and mid-sized businesses. But we're talking about, hey, look, get rid of the income tax. If you get rid of the income tax, that's going to be a ton of money back in the pockets of the middle class. It's going to help boom the economy in terms of the middle class. And you put the tax on import and exports. That's going to tax the multinationals. That's going to tax the monopolies that are across the global monopolies. That's going to tax the 0.1%, which has literally 90% of the wealth or something in the world. I mean, that's a tax that's going to hit them. And the middle class is going to be able to have a lot more spending power. It's going to allow it to reinvest into its businesses. I mean, how do they have all these crazy regulations, taxes, hidden taxes, more tax upon taxes? And they're talking about, we want to help the poor. Meanwhile, they're making everybody poor so that the super 0.01% can become ever more rich because they have all the loopholes to the taxes, the tax code.
Well, that you're absolutely correct on this. I just wrote down something that I used to always bring up about licensing, and being that we're discussing and talking to a lot of churches and people of faith. One of the things, as you know, and I don't mind giving a shout out to 94.3 FM, The Talker. for almost 5 years. We were on there with Sanity Check with Libertarian Lou and Tea Party Mike. And old Tea Party Mike, is when you talk very, very conservative, socially when it comes to issues. And one of the things I had brought up to him about the licensing. And I think one of the things that really came to him one time was, even when we were talking about the marriages and all those other things, and I one of the questions I raised to him was, why do you feel as though that you need to go to Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid to get permission to get married? And I like to throw these things out.
They're the new priests. It's like state is God. It's like the new cult.
I mean, why is that, cult. Pastor? Why do we just accept the fact that somehow we need to go get our marriage license from the state? I mean,
that's an amazing way to put it, Lou. I mean, I've never heard it put like that. That is an amazing way to put it. You have to go to Nancy freaking
Pelosi and Harry Reid to get permission to get married. I mean, we never had a license. We never had to get a marriage license. It was in the 1860s when it was Alabama and some of the southern states that originally started it, that you needed a license for a white to marry a black. And then, it kept encroaching, just like everything else that happens. It constantly encroaches on our lives until finally in 1913, they passed the Licensing Act, the Marriage License Act, and somehow all of a sudden now we need a license. Of course, we need a license for everything now. You need a license for a gun. You need a license for a dog. You need a
Exactly. Oh my gosh, it's crazy, Leo. I'm telling you, it's just too much. We were talking with Osterberg, and it's like, you know what I mean? And it's like he's complaining, and we were complaining. We were complaining about, hey, we don't want the taxes to go up in this region. The commissioners are kind of bound. It's actually, we're finding out that actually the local townships have more power in terms of laws and some of that than the commissioners. They have no say, for example, on the shooting range my brother's trying to put on his property, et cetera. But again, I mean, it's how can you have all these extra state boards and systems like the European Union regulating you in Pennsylvania?
It's totally out of control. And then, we also have to look at, seriously, I mean, the cost of our legislatures, and, they just, the Turnpike Commission, once again, just raised taxes. And I know, it's all this incremental stuff to go from Clark Summit, which a lot of your audience might not know where Clark Summit is, down to Scranton. It wasn't very long ago. It was 25 cents. It's up to 2 something now. I mean, you're only going a couple miles. I mean, but, who's getting paid from the Turnpike Commission? Do we need a Turnpike Commission? What is going on? Who's, I mean, it's these pensions and this constant, continually cost that's passed on to the taxpayer. And who's benefiting from this most often are our public servants. I mean,
public masters, you mean, right?
What's that?
Public masters, what they become. They become really the archangels. That take over the blessings of God that give them to the people. It's interesting. In Psalm 2, the Bible says that God will give you the inheritance of the world, that he will give the people of this world the inheritance of the world. He never said it to government. He didn't say he's going to give the centralized powers. He said he's going to give it to the people of the world. That's why we believe in a kingdom. There has to be private property ownership, and of course, the rod of iron and Second Amendment. The ways to defend your kingdom, so to speak. In the kingdom of God, citizens are kings and queens. You know what I mean? And they've got to have private property like a king and a queen, and they've got to have the right to defend that from tyrannical oppressors.
Absolutely. So, when we look at this, once again, when we look at this whole cost, and one of the things, I know we're kind of veering off on a few subjects here, but, once again, for your listeners, just like the licensing, and you kind of plant these seeds, and that's what I think I do, is I kind of question stuff and say, well, why? I mean, why have we just accepted this? Why here in Pennsylvania do we accept that our legislature is the most costly per capita than anywhere else in the country?
That was amazing. You said including
California.
Oh my gosh! How could that be? How could that be?
Well, I'll tell you how it be. When it starts out, I mean, when we look at our legislatures, when they're pulling down $90,000-$100,000 a year, when they have lifetime pensions, when they're getting paid $135 to go to work every day. I don't get paid $135 to go to work every day. That's what they get per day, plus all the perks.
And they get staff too.
Yeah, well, that's another whole thing. I'm just talking about just the legislators themselves. And I hate to bring this up because sometimes people say, well, you're being mean, or you're being, why do you
the taxpayers are going broke.
And and I'm not
me.
I'm not attacking anybody. All I'm saying, that was one of the reasons I ran, and I probably might run again. And I don't, quite honestly, Pastor, I don't care whether I win, lose, or draw. This is not my goal in life to be a legislature, but I think it's important to bring up that maybe salaries should be commensurate to what the people here in our communities make. I mean, people here in Wyoming County, in Pike County, in Wayne County are not pulling down as an average almost $100,000 a year. Who's the servant and who's the slave?
Oh my goodness!
Well, or who's the owner, or who's the master, and who's the slave here? I mean, this is it's really unbelievable, and I don't think it's unreal or mean to be asking our legislators why.
Oh my!
If you want to run for office,
be tremendous, Lou.
What's that?
You would be a tremendous force for good, bringing up these issues because you're fearless too.
Well, I'm going to bring up that point itself is, why don't we have a part-time legislature? Can you tell me why? Can anybody tell me why? I know what
you brought up the example of New Hampshire. That's a very important example.
Well, New Hampshire is, as far as part-time legislature. How about, well, that's little old New Hampshire. This is Pennsylvania. This is a big state. How we can never go part-time. Well, okay, well then let's look at Texas then. Texas is part-time. In fact, Texas is not only part-time, they only meet once every 2 years, and they're kicking our butt.
They're whooping our booty.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's not take that argument. But once again, when we talk about little old New Hampshire, it's the largest legislative body in the world outside of Congress and the legislature and Parliament. And once again, Pastor, I say, don't believe a word I say. We say this on our radio show all the time. Do your own research. Look it up. Don't just say just because Lou says it or somebody else says it. Get on the internet. Let's see what if this is really holding water. I mean, because sometimes you do, as sometimes, you get information, you might repeat it. And I'm always willing to say, oh, wow, I didn't realize that, or I got this information. But these are things that we have, researched over the years. So we take little old New Hampshire and the largest legislative body, once again, outside of Parliament and Congress. And that does a number of things. We always hear about taking money out of politics. How do you get money taken out of politics? Well, what you do is you increase participation.
Right.
So let's look at that. I mean, because this is another important point. Once you increase participation, so the pastor is running for, let's just say you're going to run for state legislature, and you're running against Libertarian Lou. And Libertarian Lou is Daddy Warbucks. He has all kinds of money, and he can spend any kind of money. He could say anything he wants against the pastor. Well, the legislative districts in New Hampshire is only 7,000 people. So I can spend all the kind of money I want because guess what? The pastor went around and he was able to talk to the families the seventh day. You're able to go out and shake those hands. And the people say, no, I know the pastor. I don't, but I know he's a good guy. I don't believe what Libertarian Lou is saying because he has the money and he can run the commercials. So that, for starters, once you take, okay, so when we hear our legislators say the only way, when we hear our legislators here in Pennsylvania say the only way to, only because it's so expensive that we need to decrease the size of government, I'm saying, no, you need to double and triple the size of the legislature.
That's right.
No, I'm serious.
We heard something like that.
But then once again, the one
2,100 may be a good number.
What's that?
2,100 as a legislative body.
There you go. And they wouldn't be able to pass nothing because it'd be so clogged up.
Exactly.
I always question, I always question this thing. Oh, we passed 200 New York laws this legislative session. We did great. And I'm thinking, how many more years is it going to take to get it right? Do you have to? Can you imagine your brother or yourself or having to change things 200 times every quarter or something? Because
my goodness,
when do you finally get it right? When do we pass enough laws and say, oh my goodness, when did we get it right?
Well, it should be a nation of disappearing laws. 10% of laws should disappear every year, which every 10 years, all the laws disappear.
Yeah. well, now you're talking my language. I know we do need some laws and we do need some government, but certainly
that's true. Yeah. Some of it.
But anyway, so when we look at this and I hear our legislators and I go crazy. And people are saying, yeah, let's decrease the size of the legislature. I just want to keep going back and planting those seeds. If we want to get money out of politics, what we do is increase our participation. You're never going to get money out of politics. Pastor, I was involved, New Jersey had they did a pilot program called the Clean Elections and Fair Elections in New Jersey. Now that's an oxymoron. Yeah. So what they did was they took 3 legislative districts and said, okay, we're going to get government out of politics, or we're going to get money out of politics, and we're going to fund the election. Okay. It all sounds good because you hear people say this all the time. Yeah. Let's have public funding of our elections. And I was involved in one right down in the Trenton area. And a friend of mine was running as an independent libertarian. And what was required of that was to get 800 signatures. And with each signature, you needed a $10 check. Well, for the bigger organizations, the Republicans, Democrats, it was a little easier, although the Republicans didn't even qualify in one of the pilot programs because it's very difficult. It's very difficult to go knock on a door and get somebody to sign a petition. And when they sign the petition, you have to get a $10 check from them. I was dogged with that. I was absolutely dogged with that. And it took me 4 months. I got to tell you, there were days I'd be out all day. I'd never get one. But I wound up getting the signatures for the guy that was running, and we qualified for the Clean and Fair Election Program in New Jersey. Now, the only reason I'm saying this is that what the Republicans and Democrats got were $500,000 of government of public money to run their campaigns. We got $30,000, and we took that to court. And of course, that was thrown out. They said there was no standing because at the time they said you were never going to qualify anyway, so you didn't get the money. But that's okay. It's not even about the money. But one of the stipulations of that was that you were required to participate with everybody that qualified in 2 debates. We were in 2 debates, and they were 2 high school debates. When NJ12 had the debate, the televised debate, we were told there was no room at the table for you. And the only reason I bring this up is a number of things. One is one of the reasons I feel about the media, and nothing will change. And one of the things that I brought up is nothing I don't think is going to change until we have a free and independent press and free and equal elections in the United States. But the other thing was the money. There were all kinds of other money that was coming in, PACs, all this other stuff that came in and put money into these campaigns, and everybody threw that. Nobody knew where the money was coming from. And I want to go back to what I said originally about getting money out of politics. If we want to get this, the corrosive money out of politics, what we do is we increase our participation so that somebody like yourself could run for office, and you don't have to worry about somebody theoretically like a Daddy Warbucks Libertarian Lou coming in with all kinds of money, coming out with all kinds of fake commercials, because people would get to know you. And I think that this is very, very important. I think it's important that, once again, just plant these seeds and let people start thinking, well, maybe he's right. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but it seems logical to me. And then once again, once we look like you can't increase the participation because it's going to get too expensive, once again, we look at little old New Hampshire, where the legislators get paid $100. That's it. No,
that's incredible.
And they fight over it. It is so fought over to serve your community. There are so
meanwhile, we get our legislators get $100K.
And they run unopposed.
Oh golly. Oh my goodness. We were having this conversation yesterday. And you know what my brother was saying, that hey, what do we do to change this? He asking the commissioner, what do you do to change all these bureaucracies? Dan Johnson was saying, we had him on the other a month ago.
Oh, good.
And he was saying, you know, look, every dollar that goes into the quote federal quote welfare programs or federal programs, 74 cents is used in bureaucracies. So every dollar, only 26 cents go to the people that you're actually sending it to, which is incredibly inefficient. And so we asked the question to Osterberg, you know, so how do you get past this deep state? Don't we need a Trump for Pennsylvania? Don't we need a type of person in Pennsylvania who is that Trump type figure who can just basically beat up and tear up Harrisburg like Trump is tearing up the White House? You know what I mean? I mean, goodness. I mean, we need somebody who can step up. And of course,
I probably will, whether I win, lose, or draw. You know, the difference of running as an independent. But nonetheless, this is not. I don't feel as though this is my calling in life necessarily. I do feel that calling is more from an informational standpoint to try to get information into people so that they can make, you know, not only logical, but, you know, right choices. I mean, it's very difficult to make a right choice when we have the wrong information. When you're fed wrong information,
right?
It's, you know, you think, you know, you're basing your decisions on faulty information. And I think that that's one of our problems. And once again, having a media willing to raise the questions I just raised. Why do you need to go to Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid to get married? How come more people are saying, no, I'm not going to get your stupid license.
Right.
I'm going to go into the church like it used to be, and they publish it, and then I'm married before God. Why do I mean,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Now, would you consider running as a Republican and take over the Republican Party like Trump has done?
I would, and I could, because I don't really, I don't care what label you put on me. It doesn't.
Exactly.
The main thing is, but you know, how do you break into where people are already in power, or I'm open for anything. It doesn't really matter for me. That's
why you really do have to be Daddy Warbucks, Libertarian Lou.
Yeah. We know better than that.
You got to have your billions to get in there, fund your own campaign.
Yeah, there you go. But you're right. We do need somebody Trump-like to go in and say, with no agenda, who doesn't necessarily feel as though that they need to run, the second time around. Pass it off, pass the baton off, raise these questions, start saying, wait a minute. Am I going to be a pig at the trough and call myself a public servant? Or am I going to go there and say, listen, okay, I know fair is fair. Okay. If I'm going to work full time, but maybe it should be commensurate to what the local people in this community make. Maybe instead of 90,000, maybe salary, but yet somebody has to lead the way. Somebody needs to go in there and say, you know what? It's not a lifelong position. Term limits.
Yes.
Why can't it just term limits? Yeah. And it goes on and on when we start bringing this stuff up. And that's what I'm hoping to do here, at least locally, once again, is just raise these questions in a way that doesn't necessarily have to be adversarial, Pastor, but in a way that says, let's start thinking about this. Just like Trump did. He brought up many, many questions that people started saying, wait a minute, why not?
My goodness. And your paper, Independent Gazette, was the one that was really exposed to the Cash for Kids scandal that was going on, where the judges were basically getting these huge, basically paybacks, hiring their relatives, lawyers, and psychiatrists.
To put kids in jail. Mark Chivarella, one of the judges, just was granted a new trial. That's going to be coming up. He said that wasn't his lawyers weren't any good. And isn't that unbelievable? But nonetheless, and for those in the audience that are not familiar with Kids for Cash, two judges were getting kickbacks from the private prison system for putting kids in jail. And this is not theory, Pastor. This has been brought out in court. And the movie Kids for Cash focused on 5 kids that were put into the system, and one of them was the niece of Judy Laura Fisher, who has worked with me for many years. Her niece had the audacity to get in a fight with another girl, 13-year-old girl, over a boy. And she whipped her volleyball and hit the kid in the back of the head. Now, I know these things don't happen, but it did. She got angry and she threw this volleyball. Right. That caused her to have to appear before Mark Chiavarella, the judge. And I just want people to think of this, because this always gets to me. Think of your 13-year-old daughter now in court. Mom and dad are there. And you were advised not to bring a lawyer because it's just going to anger the judge. And as that judge is talking to your daughter for throwing a volleyball in the back of the head to another girl, she is now handcuffed, legs, handcuffs her hands, puts that thing around her waist. The daughter is crying, "Mommy, Daddy, what's happening?" The mom and dad are saying, "What the heck is going on?" And 6.5 years later, after she was in jail for that outrageous offense, wow. This happened right here in Pennsylvania. And these are the questions that I ask our prosecutors and our law enforcement officers. How can you keep your mind closed? How can you go to court over and over? These are thousands of kids.
It's the pensions.
What's that?
There's a pensions, salaries and pensions.
Salary and pensions. As a matter of fact, I asked a court officer that. I said, "How can you go to sleep at night?" And he looked at me straight in the eye and he says, "Did you expect me to lose my job?"
Exactly. The good Nazi syndrome.
Pastor, it makes you cry. It really does. And I gotta say, and it's happening today. It's still going on today. That what happened to that young girl happened to another boy who bought a mini bike that turned out to be stolen for $250, 5.5 years in jail. Another girl had an argument on MySpace when MySpace was around, 6 years in jail. I'm not making this up. This is part of court documents. Kids committed suicides, kids coming out with, juvenile records. Their lives are ruined for money, for judges getting kickbacks. And this went on for years and years and years.
And they would send these kids to their nephew or uncle psychiatrists and oh
my God. Yeah. Yeah. They break you. They break you financially, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. You're broken when your kids are taken away from you. And yet nobody continues to ask these questions. What happened to them? Why do we not have cameras in courtrooms? Something that I bring up all the time.
Or in public officials, hey, they're surveilling us with freaking drones and iPads. And how come we can't surveil them while they're doing their quote public work in their public offices? There should be cameras in their office, not in the citizen streets.
Absolutely. And the problem a lot of times is that these people that are involved are part of the community. They're upstanding citizens, and people are afraid either for a number of reasons. One is that they're afraid, well, that can't happen or something. Well, I bring it up all the time. I don't care who you are. When you're being watched, you'll eat your bologna sandwich different than when you do when you're not being. When you're on film and you're on camera.
That's right.
And where our justice is administered, we have all these rules and regulations that we have to protect the kids. Well, the only people that are getting protected, obviously, we have judges and lawyers love to use the word precedents. We have precedents. Well, we have precedents right here in River City, right here in Northeast Pennsylvania, that we can't trust what's going on in the courtrooms. And once again, this is not very popular to say.
Well, I mean, it's so it's so important because these politicians are talking about themselves being public servants. Meanwhile, they're exploiting a whole federal system that is spying illegally on the public, that is intercepting every single phone call that's made. How come we can't listen to their phone calls while they're on the public payroll, talking in their public hours? How come we can't be in their meetings? Who they're meeting? Who are they meeting? Al Sharpton? Are they meeting Jesse Jackson? Are they meeting these George Soros funded operations and getting money? How come we can't know what they're doing, who they're talking to, who they're being funded by? I mean, this is ridiculous.
No, it very much is ridiculous. And that's one of the reasons why we need a legislature to stand up. And, you know, a lot of these people are our friends. I mean, people that we know, right. People that maybe fundamentally we agree with, but it's all tied to the same things. And, I brought up about the Bertelsmann Foundation and I sent that link to you guys and maybe, somewhere along the way you'll look at it. But the Bertelsmann Foundation is the largest nonprofit in Germany, and they were hired to do a documentary on the independent media. This was back last year. And I think last time I was on your show, we kind of mentioned it. Well, they finally released the documentary. And I just got the email saying that I was quoted prominently in their book that they is now in the hands of all the European policymakers. And I brought up the fact that
people who don't know, for example, I mean, you work very closely with James O'Keefe, et cetera.
Yes.
And people who broke in very important stories and investigative reporting in the inside workings of Planned Parenthood, these illegal practices they're doing, selling baby parts, all this kind of stuff. And people don't understand how important your work has been in exposing the 0.01% super elite, Bilderberg, Davos, George Soros funded operations that are alive and well in the U.S., allied with radical Islam.
It's just really, really, I can't say it enough that a free and independent press, and that's one of the reasons why it's the only organization or only not government organization, but it's the only private organization that is protected by our Constitution. And there was a reason for that. And it's not meant, our independent media is not meant to be a clap, to promote your agenda. It is to arouse and to inform the public and to keep our government on track. And
our media used to be owned by private citizens, had to be owned by a private citizen so you could sue them if they misreported or did something like that. Now it's owned by all these multinational companies, foreign investors, huge boards, which you can't sue for anything. I mean, if CNN misreports on President Trump, he can't sue them. He's not. I mean, you can't sue these big boards. You can't get to the actual owners of it. It's just like they're hiding behind all these veils of legal protection. It's like it's so, and of course that's why it's totally bought off. Working for the CIA, Operation Mockingbird. You name it.
Operation Mockingbird. There you go. Yeah. That was an interesting. That's a very interesting point right there. I mean, that was that's going back to the Church Commission, obviously, and where they found out that the CIA had planted editors into the Times and into this media and even into our TV, and it just went on from there. So, but going back to that Bertelsmann Foundation.
Oh yeah, tell us more about that, 'cause that's exciting.
Well, it was, and the fact is that they just the book just came out, and I should get a copy of it here any day now. It's in German and English, and then also their film was just recently put out in Brussels and Berlin. They just had their premieres there, and they actually had me as the lead on that. And one of the things I was talking about when I was on the radio, they were just brought, they just filmed me on radio, was, what was it about Trump? Remember, this was last year, at the beginning of last year, before he was even elected. And I said, I thought the appeal to Trump was that the American people have lost faith, not only in their government, but in the media itself, that you have this fake news out there. And that's one of the problems. And I kind of went on, and I think it's human nature, Pastor. And I think most folks will understand this, is that, if I talk ill of you, you're not going to support what I'm doing. That's human nature. It's just the way it is. And so when you investigate the courts, you're not going to see a whole bunch of lawyers and judges in your newspaper. When you go after medical malpractice, there's not going to be any doctors advertising in your paper. If you look into police abuse, everybody in the country hates your guts. If you go after political corruption, you never know what's coming your way. And the unfortunate part is you need advertisers, you need money to continue to hire people, to do investigative journalism. And yet then you get tied to the corporate dollar, and then you're no longer really true, free, and independent. So there has to be a way, and we're working on that now, to maybe, where it's funded almost individually in, small donations, where you are not beholden to anybody. And if people don't like what you do, and they could just opt out, but it's not going to upset the whole apple cart. But I think it's so important to have a free and independent press and free and equal, elections, both of which we don't have in the United States today.
Well, it was interesting. One of the parts of our conversation last night is we're talking about how do you change this culture of these bureaucracies, et cetera. And don't we need more business owners? Yes. It doesn't have to be more. People have to be. It has to be more of a fair environment where we can say, hey, I want to start my business. I want to start a small business. And the more business owners we have in the U.S., entrepreneuring and serving their customers and loving their neighbor, you name it. The more we have of that, then you have a larger voting base that actually has real world experience, that is entrepreneuring, that is out there starting their nonprofits, starting their churches, starting their small businesses, you name whatever it is. But they're out there working to fulfill their dreams that God gave them. And that, of course, leads them to start voting for politicians that will be supportive of those institutions and small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and not only for the monopolies. Don't we need Americans to get back to being entrepreneurs again and leading the way and pioneering the path to entrepreneurship instead of letting China or India take that over? Entrepreneurship, businesses, so important.
It's the backbone of, a free society. I mean, you have, when you talk about land ownership and when you talk about, small business, I mean, that's the key. And unfortunately, we have crippled it so much with taxes and regulation. And we are starting to see, I don't know how many executive orders Trump has issued, but it seems as though that he's, freeing up some of these onerous regulations that have been put on business so that we can, use our, entrepreneurial skills to really grow.
Well, Lou, stay with us. We're going to be right back from this break, and we're going to let's talk about some of the main things. I want your view on Oprah, that the Dems are trying to push on her to being the new goddess president for America, 2020. And of course, we got to talk about Steve Bannon. We'll be back with more with Libertarian Lou. Stay with us.
You betcha.
You're just willing to give it a try, and just let the universe and let God guide you from there on. And then it was not after 2 or a couple more trips with each other that we decided that this could work out actually.
There's this really clear voice that came to me like in that moment, where it was just saying like, well, Marshall hasn't rejected you, or Marshall sees you for who you are. And I kind of just like, I kind of had me dumbfounded for a moment. I kind of just sat there and I'm like, I started getting really choked up actually, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, and it was like that, in that moment, I like realized that everything that I've been praying for in terms of like having a man in my life, or like everything that I've been praying for God to have in a spouse, like I realized that all those qualities were in Marshall, and it was a really, really deep realization. And then I'm like, oh my God, everything I was getting frustrated about earlier and all that short temper means nothing anymore, because I realize now, like, it took some sifting through, but I mean, like, I see now that this is really the man that God wants me, and the man that God sent to answer all my prayers. And from there on, I'm like, okay, that's it. Nothing else really matters. I don't care what he does. This I know is from God, and this I know is for real. So I can't turn my back on this now. And that was, for me, the moment that really sealed the deal in my heart. And then shortly after was when Marshall got the phone call.
When you get to first realize that a stage of your life is ending and this is your role now, and that's when your mind really starts to say to yourself that you have to either act or think differently than you did when you were even younger, because you're going to be the new husband, you're going to be a new wife, you're going to be like a legal guardian or a person that people will look up to. And for me, when I was going through the process of even walking up on the stage, I was going like, I had never imagined that it will be like this in a million years. And I'm serious when I say that.
And yeah, I think I was really in the moment on that day. Just just so much gratitude that now it's like, this is, now we're making the covenant before God, and now this is real, and now God literally is giving us his blessing. And it was all the stuff that happened before that what made it really difficult, was just completely, it all like melted away, and it just, being there and receiving the blessing just made all the hard work and all the good, just made everything worth it. I just felt so lucky that I was able to finally receive this immense grace from God, and to be able to stand with the best person in the world and get that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Welcome back, folks, to the King's Report, Thursday, January 11th, 2018, on our final segment. The Bible says in Revelation 3:11, let no man take thy crown. We are kings and queens, co-heirs with Christ. He is the King of kings. And so as believers, we must stand strong in our sovereignty, understand the gifts of God, and also the gifts of kingship. You know, it's in the West, we usually have a very negative view of monarchies because we have satanic monarchies. But in the kingdom, we have God is, Christ is our king. And of course, all the citizens have the same inheritance as Christ, as the Bible says in Psalm 2. And there's the rule of the rod of iron, of course, which is the AR-15. It is a rod of iron that allows us to defend kingship and also private property and also freedom of speech and freedom of the press, etc. It's interesting how many people in the body of Christ think that Christ will come back as a complete despot. They fight all day long against the liberals, and then they believe that Christ is going to come back as a despot, even though that's against his character in both the Garden of Eden and in the person of Jesus Christ. It's like completely ridiculous. And the Bible says God is love. So, I mean, I don't know why it's a conflict, but for me, it's very clear. God is a God of love. And because he loves people, he protects his children, he protects his flock, but he also empowers his children as the inheritors to be those who can protect the nation with him. And so that is, of course, why it's so important to understand sovereignty. Lou, that's another topic. I'm sorry, we're getting on a little theological stuff. But Lou, I want your view on some of this insane stuff that's going on. We got Oprah 2020 maybe running. She's tied in with the Bilderberg Group. She's tied in with Bill Gates. She's tied in with David Rockefeller and the eugenicists. I mean, and then we also have on the other side, we have Julian Assange may get asylum in Switzerland now. It looks like that may be happening quite soon. QAnon and Zach Anonymous, high-level intel people inside the intelligence agencies that are remaining anonymous are saying that in the new year, we're going to see an potential EMP attack on North Korea and or taking out the Kim regime in exchange for the Chinese Guo Yuan or Miles Kwok. So let me get your view on Oprah first. Let's start with Oprah. What is your breakdown on Oprah now maybe coming on and battling Trump for the 2020?
Well, I was watching her on the news the other day. Very charismatic. I mean, yeah. She's. I could see why people are attracted to her. But once again, when you start separating the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, and I'm looking at this and I'm saying, this all sounds good. It's almost twisted, Pastor, sometimes that somehow it has to be, taking care of your community or helping your community has to be us against them. And I'm listening to her and I'm saying, well, yeah, that a lot of this stuff is good stuff, but in the sense that, the message that's coming out, like helping people, and somehow that conservatives are not, they're the mean old conservatives. And I'm looking at this and, wait a minute, it's been government that has gotten us to the point that we are today. I mean, people are impoverished. And you look at the Black community, it hasn't been the conservative values or conservative thinking that has kept them down. We've got a war on poverty.
It's the lowest ever under Trump.
What's that?
Black unemployment is the lowest on record under.
We look at
I have audio. No. Okay, Lou. Let me. Let me stop you right there, Lou. I think we lost you. We lost your audio there. We lost your audio. You're breaking up, and we're trying to get you back on. 30 seconds? Okay, 30 seconds. And we are back from that audio glitch there. Lou, finish up your last point on Oprah, and then let's move to Julian Assange.
My point was that, listening to her and I get the appeal only because I'm looking at it from a standpoint of what not people like ourselves necessarily looking at, but how the masses are looking at it and saying, oh my God, look how nice she is and she wants to take care of them. And yet I'm questioning myself and I'm saying, it's been the policies that she's pushing that have kept these people down. It hasn't been the free market system. It hasn't been, you look at the war on poverty. War on poverty has been going, how long? Once again, we were talking about how many new laws do we need? How long is it going to take? Do you think you could stay in business with a program like war on poverty since 1960? And what's it, 50 years? 50 years.
Trillions of dollars.
Right. So,
trillions of dollars, and there's no reduction in poverty increase.
Yeah, exactly. So when we look at this, I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, she's coming across as this great savior, as this person that really cares for people. And I'm saying to myself, well, wait a minute, I really care for people too. Maybe more than Oprah does, for goodness sakes.
She wants to disarm you. She wants to take away your right to protection. She wants to take away the rod of iron for the people of God, which are the last defense against tyranny. She wants to bring it in. And if you're against her, you're a racist, white supremacist, and misogynist.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So that's my take on that. I think it's dangerous. I think that you have a bought and sold for media for the most part that is just swooning over CNN, swooning over the fact that she might run. I mean, she's going to have the media behind it. And then unfortunately, Pastor, we have a large segment of our population that has been educated by the state-run schools that have been I know I'm touching on
indoctrination, brainwash.
The brainwashing, right?
They say Christianity is a brainwashing cult. They're a freaking brainwashing cult. Give me a break. Give me a break.
There you go. The state-run schools. Some of our politicians hate to hear that when I use that term, but what is it not? Is it not? Are our schools not state-run?
Oh my gosh.
So when we look at all of this, and that's my take on Oprah, is I think it's it's dangerous in the sense that people do not want to look at what the causes and effects are of our programs. And as we wind all these things down, what are the causes and effects of having all these licensing? We started out with, maybe people that are just joining us. Why do you need to go to the altar of Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid to get permission to get married? I mean, I know that you love that one.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
But it's a fact, right? I mean, when we look at this overreach, of everything that the government has done, and it continues, and yet we don't question. We as a public don't say, no, I don't want it. I mean, I've said this. I said this back in when I was on 94.3 FM2, even about, special permits, I said, why do I need a permit? It's my right to carry. Why, but everybody went and they got their special permits. Well, that's fine. Maybe I choose not to do that. I mean, I don't feel somebody has to kind of like sometimes say, no, it's not right. We don't need this stuff. But
exactly. It is just almost like psychological pre-programming. They're just programming you to be a slave, programming you to be, just a servant to the state, programming to worship God and worship Pelosi. Now, let me change real quick and get your take quickly on Trump's new decision, especially in the new year, that potentially on the alternative media side, people on the inside of the White House saying he may act on North Korea, start another war in the Korean Peninsula, making some deals with China. What's your view on that? Ron Paul hates it. Ron Paul says, stay out of it. It's a big hive. Stay out of Saudi Arabia and the Iran conflict. What's your view on that?
Well, the more I learn, the more I realize how uninformed I am on things. So on the outside of it, I would say stay out of it. I would probably maybe err or be right as Ron Paul does. But once again, Pastor, these are the things that, we're basing decisions or I can make a decision based on not all the correct information. I suspect that you probably know a lot more about what's going on in the Korean Peninsula than I do. And there might be reasons why we should get involved. But on the surface of it, I would say from what I know and what I've been informed on, I agree with, stay out of entangling alliances as best we can. When you trade with people, we are better off. Of course, there's a whole kind of mess on the Korean Peninsula, but my initial reaction to that would be, I probably don't have all the information to make a correct assumption on things. I could spout my views, but if I don't, I'm only talking about information that or giving my view based on not all the information that I probably need to have.
Well,
how about yourself?
It's interesting because like Korea is almost like the 51st state. South Korea is almost like the 51st state of the United States. And because the U.S. has been protecting and allowing to have the, its basic constitutional system there, even though the people are disarmed, you have one of the most prosperous Asian countries in the world. You have some of the highest per capita income in all of Asia, almost in all the world, I believe. Seoul, Korea has one of the per capita incomes in the world. And this is because of the blessing of Judeo-Christian values and the Constitution that comes from Judeo-Christian decentralized Christianity. It doesn't come from centralized Christianity. It comes from a notion that, yes, we may not, George Washington may have stepped down from being a king, but he made all the citizens also be able to become kings. You can't treat us like slaves and serfs. You can't make us go through TSA lines and be sexually molested. Obama doesn't have to deal with that crap. Hillary doesn't have to deal with that crap. The Queen of London doesn't deal with crap. So I should not have to deal with that crap. I am also a son of God, and I almost, a son or daughter of God, and we are also co-heirs with Christ, and we have kingship. You know what I'm saying? You can't treat us like that, just like you don't treat Prince Charles like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But but in the Korean Peninsula, you've got that lunatic in the north, which of course done by design by the Davos Group and the Bilderberg Group and the George Soros, Carnegie, Rockefeller. Patton and MacArthur wanted to go in and take out China. They wanted to actually nuke the whole thing, get rid of the whole China problem. But of course, China has been now set up and propped up as the new superpower. America's going to die, and it's done on purpose to deindustrialize the U.S. with the UN sanctions. Put us in unfair TPP trade deals and destroy our sovereignty, make us another bloc, failed Europe. That was the plan, and then prop up China as a new model of totalitarian goodness. And I mean, it's like that's hell on earth. It's absolutely hell on earth. It's going to be North Korea worldwide. That's what we don't want. And of course, but Trump is in a rock and a hard place. He's got to deal with this issue. I mean, look at this guy shooting off freaking ICBM missiles over Japan. I mean, The only problem is if he hits it, there's definitely going to be residual. You got almost 20 million people in Seoul City and surrounding areas within 38 miles of the DMZ. You're talking about like 8 million dead in the first hour. I mean, a lot of millions are going to die. But again, it almost feels like, I mean, it's just such a terrible situation. But of course, that Kim regime is totally wicked. All our family members, for example, in Korea, they're dead. I mean, they're all killed. You know what I'm saying? My dad was in a gulag. You know what I mean? So like, we have no living relatives basically in North Korea. They're all dead. You know what I mean? So it's not like this is not the kingdom. You know what I mean? This is hell on earth.
There you go.
Well, anyways, we have run out of time, Lou, and it's always a pleasure and joy to talk with you. And
bye
on all these things, because you have such an important not only voice, but the work you're doing, and of course, such an incredible analysis breakdown. Have been involved in investigative journalism, really at the tip for so many years. We're so grateful for Lou, all you're doing. Hey, let us know those links, how people can support you, and of course, that new documentary that's coming out. Everybody's got to check that out. Let people know how to support the Independent Gazette.
Thank you, Pastor.
All right, Lou. We'll see you next time, my friend.
Yeah.
Let's get together. It's always good to see you. We thank Lou. We thank you all for joining us this day. Hey, it's warming up, folks. It's going to be 59 degrees on Friday. My goodness, it's time to go camping. You understand? Oh, my goodness. Get in God's creation. Give him the glory today. We hope you have a blessed day. We will see you tomorrow, 5 a.m. sharp on the King's Report. God bless, Godspeed, and may his kingdom come.
In our hearts again, increase in us, we pray. Unveil why we're made. Come set our hearts ablaze with hope, like wildfire in our very souls. your church. We need your power in us. And we seek your kingdom